Greetings, disruptors. Greetings, greetings. Awesome. It's your girl Selena here of Disruptor Coaching, and you are listening to Coaching Conversations. Today, our guest is Dr. Joey Liu. Hope I'm saying
Right.
that correctly.
You
Um,
got it.
awesome. And we are talking about being biracial and neurodivergent trauma. I have so many
Mhm.
questions, Dr. Joey.
I can't
Let's,
wait to dive in.
well, thank you. Well, thank you for saying yes to the conversation. And let's just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
How do you show up in the world, darling?
Oh, you know what? I show up in the world more and more as multidimensionally as I possibly can. And so you touched on a little bit in the title, you touched on being biracial and neurodivergent, which each of those names in and of itself holds a multiplicity, right? But that's also not all there is to the story of me. And I'm really conscious and intentional about not being flattened by any one label so that I can show up in the world as creatively, as fully, as bigly. Now, I know that's not a word, but I have a poem called Baby Be Big. So it's a big part of my philosophy, like be as big as you're meant to be in this lifetime. We came here to experience humanity in all of that fullness. And that's complex, messy, layered, fun, creative, dynamic. It's never one thing. So that's how I show up in the world.
I love it. I love it. I have so many questions.
Hmm.
One, enunciate your name for me because I'm very
Yeah.
particular about making sure that I say it correctly. And I've got this flipper going on because I'm getting what are these things? Implants. So
Mm,
it sometimes messes up with what I'm saying. They look like they're gonna
sure.
fall
My
out.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you look great. You
Girl,
do.
I'm just now realizing that I still got my little hair things in. So this is gonna be an interesting show.
I thought that was part of the style. So you're all good. I think it looks great. Yes, I would love to tell you my name. First name Joey is easy, like a baby kangaroo. Last name is Liu. And actually, if you really want to know how we say it in my language, which is Hakka, we would say Leo. But how I introduce myself to the English speaking world is Liu. So it sounds like you're saying the word you with an L in front of it, Liu. It rolls together.
Leo. Leo. I
Yes.
love that.
You got it. Yeah, that's
Leo.
it.
Leo. Now that you said you with an L in front of it, I think
Yes.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And so what type of doctor are you?
I have a PhD in education, and my focus specifically was in culture and curriculum.
Mm. And then you mentioned Haku. Did I say that?
So it's Hakka. So my
Hakka.
ethnicity on my father's side is Hakka. So that is both the name of our ethnic group of people and our language.
And where are the Hakka people originated from?
So our history is a little bit complex. We don't know the exact location, but somewhere in China, we have been a diasporic people for generations and generations. I
Mhm.
am 20th generation here in Taiwan. So my ancestors came to Taiwan 20 years ago, long before it even existed as what we know today as Taiwan, when it was just the indigenous people here. But there are Hakka people all over the world, all from diasporic push outs and pull towards in different regions of the world.
I love this so much. I'm learning. You all, I
Mhm.
intentionally don't ask a lot of questions before I interview my guests because I'm curious and I always want to stay curious. So um,
Yes.
this is awesome. So I am familiar with seeing sometimes on social media kind of the haka. Am I saying it right, haka?
You might be referring to the Maori's ritual dance, the Haka, has taken social media by storm in recent weeks because of the performance of the Haka in the parliament, right, as a protest.
Is
So
that the
that
same? as
So
your
it's interesting, and we've talked about this. We, as in like my family and community, have talked about it for a long time, and I still don't have like the historical answer to it. What we know is that the Maori people, who are the indigenous people of New Zealand, they originated from one single canoe that came from Taiwan and the indigenous groups in Taiwan. So I don't know if there was a linguistic sort of, crossover that happened over time with my ancestors who originally were from China but had been pushed out. If they had ended up somehow with the indigenous people that would end up going to New Zealand and are known as the Maori people. So even though we are not the same clan, we're not the same tribe, the word, there's some linguistic connection there between their dance and my people.
I
Yeah.
love this so much. Well,
Or coincidence.
we are all connected,
I
really.
believe that too.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. So tell me why we're having a conversation about being biracial.
You know what? I think that was something that you connected to when I originally sent over my form for you. And I was really glad you did because no one yet has held space for this particular conversation about being biracial. And so I'm really honored to share this with both your listeners and mine. It's such a unique experience being mixed in this world. And when you ask me, how do I show up in the world? And I say, I show up as multidimensionally as you can. That is a testament to my healing journey because I think a lot of folks who either biracial or transnational, meaning they come from multiple nations or cultures, there can be this sense growing up that you're never enough of one thing, right?
Mm,
And you're too much of everything else to really fit in and belong. So
mm,
growing up, I was born in Taiwan. I moved to the States right before I turned 3. And
okay.
there was this feeling of I don't fit in here, but people look at me, they expect some of my earliest memories, Selena, were being told to speak English before I even realized I was code switching. So I could understand English and I was speaking back in Hakka and I didn't realize I wasn't speaking the same language. So being yelled at by teachers and say, speak English, you're not allowed to speak that language here, you're going to make people feel left out. And as a little girl, you're going like, what? I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm just
Absolutely.
expressing what's on my heart the way that we do at home. And so being biracial, multilingual, multinational, you just have this complex experience of wondering where home is and early on feeling not at home in your own body, going somewhere, anywhere, and having people feel like they have the liberty to comment on your phenotype, what you look like, trying to decipher where you're from and what do you look like more? Do you look like more of this or that? I mean, the unsolicited guessing game of where are you from has followed me my entire life, especially in my childhood and upbringing. And so it forms a lot of complex inner stories, right?
Mhm.
That need TLC, and that we're not given a lot of space for, and we're not given a lot of guidance with, especially not in dominant society or in education systems to navigate those complexities.
So what would you like to share regarding that? Would you care to share more of your experiences, the lessons learned? What do you
Mm.
really want people to know when it comes to being biracial?
I think that if this message is going out to other folks who are biracial or mixed or feel like they hold multiple identities all in one, which to some extent we all do, right? But it is a very particular experience being mixed. My message is that there is no one way to show up in the world as yourself. There's no right way or wrong way. And to really lean in at this point now, there are so many stories out there. Are so many people who are living testimonies to claiming and reclaiming their identities. And so if you don't feel like you have that camaraderie in your inner circle, if you feel like you're the only one. I grew up, me and my sisters, the only biracial kids in our neighborhood, in our community. And so if you feel like you haven't found your people yet that uniquely understand that experience, the internet is a great place to start connecting. But for me, really so much of the healing started in the written word through interacting with other folks' stories. Um, and so start there and then start to really interrogate yourself, like get curious about yourself, give yourself creative license to make your story your own, the one that empowers you. Start to tease out where other people's voices have snuck into your head and
Mm.
told you this is what you are, this is what you're not, this is what you're not enough of, this is what you're too much of. Start to tease out other people's voices so you can get to that still small place within and hear your own voice and find your creative license to shape your identity exactly the way that it most empowers you and serves your soul's mission on earth. That's when you're going to drop into that satisfaction of really being alive as yourself and nobody else.
I love that. And how I take that in is you start to not give a shit about what other people think.
Yeah, and you know what? I love that I don't give a shit attitude, and I also temper that a little bit or balance that a little bit with, especially growing up as somebody who's super sensitive and caring as well. And this probably is a conversation going along with being neurodivergent, but also some of the elements of being a eldest daughter in an Asian immigrant household. So some of those things were put on me, and some of those things I actually claimed for myself because I love being caring. So yes, I've had to learn to not give a shit about others, but also in that same breath, to know that I give a shit about so much as long as it's my choice, as long as it serves me, as long as it doesn't detract from me or disrupt my sense of wellness and my sense of wholeness. I can care. I can care so much so that those boundaries and though that inner wisdom and that inner unshakability of knowing who you are and just how much you care, you hold on to that instead of trying to please anybody else from the outside.
Sure. Um, there's so many thoughts. I haven't even looked at the questions and I don't even know what they are.
You have
I
great questions too. I really appreciated them.
Awesome. I will look at them. One that I typically ask, so I'm going to ask it here. As we know, I'm known as the disruptor coach, and I love to have
Yeah,
conversations with folks that are disruptive in their area of expertise. So I'll ask you now, in your journey, what have you had to
yeah.
disrupt?
Yeah, that question is pretty easy for me because I came into education. So I'm an educator before I came online as a coach. I spent 12 years in the public school classroom, Title I schools, predominantly in the neighborhood that I grew up in myself. And so I came in with the intention of disrupting harmful oppressive systems. So my answer is twofold. Number one, I'm always pushing back against oppressive systems that I feel like have been designed to keep others down and to inflict harm on people. I'm always disrupting, and we can get into what that looked like a little bit more if you're curious. But the other
Absolutely.
side of
Let's
the
go there.
the other side, I'll just answer this really quickly. The other side of that is not just pushing and disrupting externally. I'm also always disrupting those limiting narratives within, right? So I'm always disrupting people's expectations of me, right? That box that, and this goes back to some of our previous answers, that box that people put me in, but also self-imposed limiting beliefs or self-imposed comfort zones, right?
Mm,
Even past successes can become things that you need to start disrupting if you realize that they are feeding your ego and not your purpose. So I'm always trying to live in that space of balance where I'm disrupting and unsettling and cleaning house internally as much as I need to in order to keep doing the work of disruption on the outside. It has to be a balance, right? Your inner world has to be right in order to show up aligned and do the work that you're doing, especially when you're doing work that where you're fighting systems, where you're standing up for yourself and others, where you're showing up as a leader. You have to have that balance.
I love this so much, and you probably see me grinning because this feels like me and my journey. I
Mm,
am very self-reflective. I've been that way as long as I've known myself. Like, do I, is this what I feel? Is this really how I want to show up?
yeah.
I always felt like I was different from the rest of my family. Very,
Hmm.
very emotional and sensitive, but at the same time would knock your block off.
Yeah,
You know,
that's lover and fighter.
right. Felt like, don't try me. And so I'm very curious about where you grew up and what systems
Mm.
you felt were oppressive that you were pushing back on.
Yeah, I love this question. So we immigrated to the United States, my family and my two sisters and I, when I was right before I was three. We first landed in Seattle for a little bit, but for the most part, I grew up in Anaheim, California. And so for folks who don't know that, you might have heard of it if you've ever visited Disneyland or wanted to visit Disneyland. But outside of Disneyland, it is not the most magical place on earth. It is actually one of the highest density areas or outside of Los Angeles.
Mm,
And I believe this is still true right now. I think all of the schools K through 12 in that district are Title I schools, meaning that um, the majority population of folks qualify for free or reduced lunch. So it is a low working class majority population. It's also this beautiful melting pot of culture. So I grew up a block away from what's called Little Gaza. And we
mm,
had a lot of immigrants from Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and other areas of the Middle East. Most of my neighbors and community members were immigrants from Mexico. And
mm-hmm.
then we also bordered some communities that had enclaves of Vietnamese,
Oh,
other Southeast Asian communities. And then I particularly grew up in a Chinese speaking community because my parents both spoke Chinese. My mother is white American of Irish descent, but she learned Chinese and that's how she met my father. So I grew up in a very, very diverse area, but I have another interesting spin to my story. I never went to school K through 12. I never went to school K through 12. Yes.
were you
So
homeschooled? What
yeah,
did
in a
that look
sense. And
like?
this is where my story then intersects with parts of my story that are still sacred. So because I am in a chapter of rebuilding and repairing my relationship with my mother after over a decade of her not being in my life, um, I'm very conscientious to keep some of these early childhood stories sacred in a way that I can figure out a way that honors both my truth, which was
Mm,
challenging at times growing up, and also this possibility. Because for anyone out there who's healing, like this is me speaking to myself, but this is also me sharing the message to you. Healing sometimes necessitates like breaks and boundaries, right? With relationships that weren't healthy. And also, I want to speak life into a full possibility of healing, like generational healing, that when you do your work and you do your healing to that level, there is a possibility that in this lifetime, we will see like full restoration and healing with some of those members who did cause harm and we experienced unhealthy relationships with. But because that is so new with my mother in this chapter, I'm very conscious about how I surface some of those stories. So I think I've given you guys a little bit of a taste and context without diving into too much detail. So yes, probably not the most empowering choice for me to not have attended school, but that is the reality. I didn't get to attend K-12 schools. Now that was both a blessing and curse. So I fell through the cracks where I could have received a lot of support and the support that I needed at that age from other adults in my community,
mm-hmm.
me and my sisters. But at the same time, I was able to step in as a very young public school teacher in my early 20s. And I was able to come in with a world of possibility living in my imagination because I had not been conditioned in the same systems of oppression that now I showed up to serve. And I showed up with a mission to give my students in the classroom what I wish I would have had as a child growing up. But the reason I didn't get it was different from them, right? It wasn't that I went to school and I didn't get it because those teachers just didn't give a shit about me, right?
Right.
I just didn't even get a chance to show up in that space to receive care. And so I showed up really like school can be anything I want to make it. And that's what happened. I really disrupted the status quo at the schools that I was serving at because someone would tell me, oh, that's not the way things are done. And I'd be like, excuse me, why?
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it happen. And we
Right.
would.
I
I
love
would work with the students and the families and would make things happen.
I love, love, love this so much. Wow, so many questions. Wow. And in your 20s, so what type of teacher were you at that point when you came in?
The curriculum I was teaching was language arts. I had my credential in language arts, and I chose language arts because I felt like it was the field that gave me the most room for critical thinking and self-expression. And so stories have been at the core of my pedagogy from day one. I had issues with bullying. Let's reach into stories because what happens when you hear people's stories, right? You see their humanity and you see yourself in them. You
Mhm.
can't bully somebody who you start to recognize as yourself. Or
Absolutely.
if you do, you have to reckon with why am I being unkind to myself? And so then that's when all that, social emotional support came in my role as a teacher and mentor back then. So yes, on paper, I was a language arts teacher, but I felt like I was always just teaching kids how to come home to themselves, how to create home
Mhm.
with one another. So we grew up in communities with a lot of gang violence, working class. So a lot of times you didn't have both parents, or if you did have both parents in the household, they were working multiple jobs and were able to be as present with children. So children needed a lot in the community that I grew up in. And so a lot of that dysfunction and a lot of that not getting your needs met at a young age would show up in the classroom as disruption, right? As fights and bullying and things like that. But the root cause is never that hard to find when you know where to look. And when we start to really nurture those roots, community grows in the most beautiful and magical ways possible. Like I'm a living testimony to that.
I love this. So did you stay in that community as you were learning and going into education as well? Or did you
I
come back?
actually got Yeah, I came back. So I got my credential in LA where I had graduated from college. I graduated from college and my master's at UCLA. So I got my credential for folks who know LA in Koreatown. So that's near downtown LA. And then two things happened. One, I went through an experience of sexual assault during my master's program, which actually pushed me out of that program. I was able to graduate with accommodations, but it was no longer safe for me to stay in that environment. And then the second thing was I was being called home. By going through different levels of my own trauma, I realized that if I'm going to serve this mission of healing and making community and spaces of belonging, I need to do so in the space where I came up. And that was another level of healing for me. So I decided I never thought I would ever return to Anaheim. Having grown up there, like you, if you talk to anyone growing up in that time, like, no, you don't go to college to go back to, especially not to Anaheim. But I went back and spent some of the most magical years of my life forming community there. And then the back end of my career, I actually got pushed out when I was pregnant. They actually moved my classroom. They literally moved my furniture out of my classroom while I was giving birth to my son.
Wow.
Talk about another level of systemic trauma. Yes, and so I ended up finishing my career in California in a neighboring district more inland before moving with my family. Now I'm located in Taiwan.
I heard you say that. That sounds incredible. So we'll get into that as well. Anything else you want to share about your time going back to your community and then teaching in the system where you, it sounds like, never had the opportunity to participate in, but it sounds like
Mhm.
you've had a lot of effective change in that
Mm.
system with the impact on the children that you were called to serve.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. It was really a time of co-creation because I want to just, be so grateful for that time of my life. I was single. I didn't have children at the time. So I was serving as a teacher almost 7 days a week. And from like those kids would eat, a lot of the kids would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with me. So I was on campus 12 hours a day. That was my home away from home.
Mm.
And we made home in a really beautiful way there. And I say it was co-created because I really had the opportunity to listen to student voice, to their parents' voices. I had a hand in helping carve out space for some of these parents had been so marginalized and been made to feel like they weren't welcome on these campuses. The students asked for a Black student union, and they had received so much pushback for years saying it can't exist. And I go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We have a Asian Pacific Islander student club here, and we have a Hispanic Heritage Club here. Why aren't our Black children getting a Black student union? This is a national organization. This feeds into colleges. This is like directly related to their futures, you know. So we were able to get that established, start bringing the parents and the families back on campus, active in events, out there in the community, doing community service, just having their voice and visibility
Yeah.
be honored and acknowledged. And from that, then we also built a spoken word team and course. We got the course UC and Cal State approved, and a team that then was invited to speak on stages, participate in competitions, and that really started to take off and get acknowledged. And it was my kids and their voice and their stories that was at the center of all of that.
What age group? What grades are we talking?
Ninth through 12th. And what
Awesome.
was really beautiful, I want to say, is that it was such a melting pot. So I would also be the teacher that would be given like all of the brand new students who were immigrants to the country and could barely speak English. And I would also be given kids with IEPs, known as special ed students. And so it was just, you would have everybody. You come into my classroom at lunch and it would be like the football players, the basketball players, the indie kids, sort of the potheads. And then you'd have your Yu-Gi-Oh players and your like recent immigrants, you know, whether from Asia or the Middle East or whatever. You'd have
Yes.
every person represented, cheerleaders, Black Student Union in there, the straight A students, just everyone in there, just making home, making family with one another. And this, I got to witness them exceed anything I knew about how we form community and socialize. Just like I learned so much from them. Just they just needed a space. They just needed a space to be safe and to be themselves
Absolutely.
and to show up
Absolutely.
as multidimensionally. And then you just sit back and as a teacher, you just go, oh my gosh, like I have so much to learn from them.
Absolutely. I feel that I'm a boy mom. I have a son, Richard.
Mm.
He lives in LA. He's an actor, producer, writer, model,
Um,
semi-pro bowler. And I feel like learning from him and being his mother is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And
yeah.
and and sometimes the worst. Because kids, oh
It
my
can
God.
be hard. It can
Yes.
be hard.
And I'm just fascinated right now by listening to you share about the children. Walk me through the journey of going back and having the opportunity to serve in this way. What was happening internally? Because
Yeah.
you weren't in that environment. What was the downsides of some of that for you? Because it sounds very magical,
Mm.
but I'm wondering how really challenging that was for you.
Mhm. Now, by the time I came back to Anaheim, I'd already been a classroom teacher, both through student teaching and in private school setting. So
Okay.
I'd already been in the classroom. And prior to this, I should mention that I really committed to being a teacher while I was volunteering in Tanzania in schools there, and that's where the students there. So right after I graduated from college, I was like, there's a fork in the road moment where I was either going to go pursue a master's in architecture to work on sustainable design, and so I did a crash course in that, and then I had this opportunity lined up to teach for a semester in Tanzania. And I was working in schools there, and the students there told me, Miss Joey, never stop teaching. You're meant to be a teacher. And I heard that calling, and I said, okay. And I feel like I'm still making good on that word to this day. So I'd been in teach, and I should also mention that as early as 16, I was on public school campuses as a tutor. So I've been
Oh,
supporting myself with work since I was 16 years old through nannying and tutoring. And I would often get hired in positions alongside like Harvard grads, Ivy League grads, doing SAT support, but then on the other end of it, I was doing remedial literacy support. So I was in the public schools that I had never even attended. And it started as early as when I was a minor and went through my entire college career. So I was very familiar with the school system, even though I hadn't been a student. And I was
I
familiar with the school
love
system
this.
from from a place of the gaps, because I was supporting the people who was falling through the gaps when I was doing the remedial programs. And so, and I was also in these families' homes. So I would go to the schools to meet with them, but then I would also come and spend hours in the homes with them, making sure I was getting students up to the reading level so they wouldn't be held back or they
I
wouldn't
love
fail. Yeah. So yeah,
it.
complex, a lot of complex context.
I see that. It would appear on the surface that there could have been a gap or a weakness there because you had not gone to formal school, and it sounds very much like it was a strength, that it is a calling and where you were meant to be, that it did not necessarily hinder you from anything at all. I
Not
love
too
that.
much. I mean, I can remember lessons, especially when I was given juniors for the first time. So that was sort of the highest level curriculum I'd ever been given. And I can remember being like, these kids are going to see straight through me. They're going to see that I'm a fake English teacher. I've never, they're gonna know I don't know the difference between like you'll hear even now sometimes my grammar, is not traditional grammar or whatever. I'm a language learner, all these things. And I would be like, they're gonna know that I don't know this formal thing or that. And in those moments I had to be like, does that make you any less of a teacher?
Absolutely.
So I'd have to coach myself through that, and often I would approach it with humor. Often I'd name the insecurity itself, or I'd welcome them and I'd thank them for pointing out any mistakes. Oh my goodness, what would I do without you? Thank you so much for
I
having my
love this
back.
so
And so
much.
when you just excuse ego, it's like, is there really any weaknesses? No, everything's just a learning opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Joey, I am fascinated by you. My
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
So let's talk about neurodivergent trauma. That is a very big word to me. I have heard the word a lot. I have no idea what that is. What is that?
Neurodivergence is so I think it's a word that we're going to move away from, hopefully, in upcoming generations. The idea behind neurodivergence is that it is a difference from a typical way of being wired in
Mm.
our brain and our nervous system. So there's the term neurotypical, which refers to basically anyone you would think of fitting into a general education classification, not needing special education
Oh,
diagnoses or supports, right?
okay.
So you would think of neurotypical as somebody who doesn't have a label or classification like autism, ADHD, learning disabilities or anything like that. You have neurotypical. And then the word neurodivergence is this idea of anything different from what's normal, what's typical. So you can see, and even just me describing that, it's a little bit problematic.
Yeah.
It's centering the power on this idea or the social construction of there is a typical or a normal brain type. And so
Yeah.
I think the research and the conversations are pushing us to understand that all of our neurotypes are on a spectrum, right? There's just so many different neurotypes out there, and that we all possess and embody different ones. And at the same time, there is some usefulness in having labels to find common ground, right? And so for me, I've been able to understand and embrace and receive a diagnosis of being on the autism spectrum later in life. So in
Hmm.
my early mid 30s. I'm 36 now. I think that I really started to embrace and receive this diagnosis at around 32 or 33. So it's only been in the last few years.
Hmm.
And my experience of that is the label is there to help you as much as you want it to help you. And then anything that feels limiting to you, you don't have to let it limit you. You again, like going back to being biracial, anything in your life, find what serves you and release anything that doesn't. And that's been my experience with understanding my autism diagnosis. It's been amazing to find common ground and community with it. It's been amazing to look back on my life and go, okay, that's why that was the way it was. And that's why I was the way I was.
Right.
That's why people saw and received these elements of me. And also then to work through and say, this is not a prison sentence for me. This is not a new limitation for me. And it's also not an excuse for me to be any type of victim because that is not my storyline. So
Lilia,
it's been all of
there's nothing about you that says
that.
let's be clear about that. I see strength and will, a strong sense of self-will and identity. I
Mm.
am curious. You're a coach, and I'm not sure we talked about what type of coach and what led you there.
Yeah, so I call myself a life leadership and communication coach. There was a time where I was also calling myself a speaking and writing coach, but I felt like that was a little bit too limiting. I do have a life coaching certification. I'm also Kundalini yoga certified, and then my PhD was drew so much knowledge from indigenous and decolonizing frameworks. So I bring all of that with me into what I do. Yeah, but yeah, life leadership and communication coaching is really at the intersection of my work with folks.
So tell us more about your work with folks. I'm specifically curious about the indigenous, and what was the other word that you used?
Decolonizing
Colonize. Yeah,
frameworks.
let's get into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving me the space because I feel like this is such a necessary conversation. And I want to honor first my Indigenous teachers who poured into me for me to even have, right, the knowledge and capacity to speak on this. And I'm just humbled because I'm still a student and I'm still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when we think about decolonizing and indigenous knowledge, we're really looking at the entire world and our existence in this world through a very particular lens that acknowledges that sort of all of the systems of oppression that we exist within right now had a starting point in colonization and then probably more broadly in imperialism, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in these moments of history where some groups of people took it upon themselves to exert force, power, violence over other groups of people, stripping them of their rights to autonomy over their body and to their relationships with their land, with their knowledge, and with their own communities, with each other,
Absolutely.
stripping them and repressing them from their rights to self-determination, to living a life that of their own choice. We are now experiencing generational trauma because of these histories. And no matter what your background is, whether you're indigenous, whether you're Black, indigenous, Asian, person of color, person of the global majority, or you are of European descent, colonization has harmed all of us, and it
All of
is
it.
something that
Absolutely.
we all need to heal from. And so that's a lens that I look at that balances when we're working with folks and they're healing and they're reclaiming of their power and their confidence and their communication and their ability to make relationships and make their path in this world. Yes, we're dealing with sometimes individual level traumas and individual level choices, but we have to see all of that as interconnected into these
Mm-hmm.
larger systems of oppression and harm.
And so who would be your ideal clients?
My ideal clients, I say, are always heart-led. We'll start there. Folks that are really, despite anything that the mainstream or dominant systems telling you about, you should do this to be successful, their heart is telling them, I gotta go a different way. So they're heart-led. I also hold particular space for people of the global majority because space has not been held for them in dominant culture. I do still work with folks of European descent, and I have, because I'm biracial, I have that unique bridge into cultures. So I really can work with people of multiple perspectives as long as we're aligned in our values that acknowledges we are beyond ready for the voices of the people of the global majority to be centered and amplified, especially those that hold ancient collective and indigenous knowledges. Those are the knowledges that are going to help us right these wrongs as quickly as possible, and give our entire planet a chance to survive all of this mess.
Absolutely. I hear you. So when you say people of the global majority,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
It's a way of decentering whiteness when I say that. So instead of saying non-white folks, we know that the majority of people on this planet are not of European descent, right? So instead of saying BIPOC, which, though each of those being Black is such a unique experience, especially if you're Black of the diaspora, right? Of descendant of enslaved folks. That's such a unique experience, and it feels limiting to be lumped into other like people of color. Same with Indigenous, and then just saying people of color to acknowledge, people of Asian descent, of Middle Eastern descent, of all of our cultures, which in themselves are entire stories, right?
Absolutely.
And entire compound stories. So every person within a certain community or a certain identity, nobody is a monolith either. No one culture is a monolith either. So it's just a way of making space for everybody's stories and identities to be acknowledged, but then also decentering whiteness. So saying that we don't have to be non-white, we don't have to like measure ourselves against the European standard. We could say, hey, most of the people in the world, make up the global majority, and it's our knowledge that has been historically excluded the most, but in this moment in time is really what's going to save us.
I love this so much, girl. I feel like you're kind of almost a superhero.
Oh, no, no, I'm just a human. I am just a human, but I appreciate and receive your acknowledgement.
This is just fascinating to me. We'll switch gears a little bit. I love to kind of have personal conversation as well. Before we do that, is there anything else around the work that you currently do that you want to share? Maybe I didn't ask the question.
Oh, I appreciate that. So my work is really a work of helping I say leaders, but everybody can be a leader, right? So you don't have to be a leader like as your title on your job. If you have a heart to step up and make a difference and be a change maker, my work is really for you. And you've heard me speak in a lot of these responses to questions. My work really embodies this balance of the inner work and the outer work. So we do our inner story work first to really heal from stories, find our more empowering stories. You really reclaim your voice on your terms, right? And so you do a lot of that inner story work to find yourself in the most empowering way. And then I support you in finding the most empowering ways to put that out into the world. And I also acknowledge sacred stories. You mentioned, I mentioned to you, you heard me mention that a powerful part of my framework is helping folks navigate to be a public leader and to show up for folks. Doesn't mean that you expose every single part of yourself and you leave yourself vulnerable, right? But
Mhm.
rather that you make very empowered, conscious choices about the lessons that you are sharing so generously with the world, the stories that you're sharing so generously with the world, all the while acknowledging which ones are sacred. Some are sacred for a time because you're still working on them, you're still healing them, you're still repairing those relationships or still repairing whatever has to happen within. And some are sacred for this lifetime. And you just understand that's between me and whatever divine you're connected to. But all of that becomes a process that you will internalize in the work that we do together. And it's very empowering and very liberating.
I love this, girl. Okay. I love it. I love it. So if you are out there and you hear Dr. Joy's voice and she is speaking to you, um, we're going to talk about how you can connect with her. So, Dr. Joey, um, wow, I love to bring a little bit of the personal into the fold, so they also get
Yeah,
opportunity to really know you in the
yeah.
conversation. And you mentioned that you are currently living in Taiwan.
hmm
How did you end up in Taiwan?
So I mentioned I was born here, and all of my dad's side of the family's here. I've always felt like Taiwan was home, a home that I've been trying to come back to. And I did spend some time here when I was 16, 17. And then my dad said, I didn't immigrate to the US to have you not come back and go to school and graduate with a US degree. So that dream was dashed for a time. But now in my 30s and I have two children and I'm married and my husband and I both had six-figure stable jobs at home in Southern California. I graduated with my PhD, and we looked at each other and we're like, is this it? And we knew it wasn't it. Like we have big visions. We've had big visions. Our visions is bringing us back to stewarding the land, having a farm, and really doing community work and advocacy work and fighting for our earth. And we knew that that it wasn't going to happen in California. We were both away from our what we felt like was home. My husband's from Hawaii. He grew up in Hawaii,
Mhm.
and so we said, where are we gonna go first? And we landed on Taiwan because we're honored and privileged enough that my grandparents are still alive. So my children's great grandparents,
Oh,
my
wow.
Hakka great grandparents are still alive in their 90s, and they're our knowledge holders of our culture and our language, and time with them is short. And so we said, all right, we didn't have any jobs lined up. We didn't have anything but a knowing in our hearts and a choice to follow that, right? Just trust and surrender. We sold our house, we left our jobs, we landed in Taiwan and said, our kids are going to go to school here. We're going to live right next to my grandparents and aunties and uncles, and we're here until we're not. So
I
until our
love that.
chapters transition again, that's where we're at.
And it's all about that knowing. How long have you been there?
So we've been here for a year and a half now.
Awesome. Awesome. How's it going?
It's beautiful. I mean, I would have never imagined myself as a business owner. Like, I really moved here thinking, oh, I'll find some full-time remote curriculum, design work or work in institutions. And it was by taking that leap of faith and walking away from the job without having something lined up that, I had this intention to really fully decolonize and understanding myself as being able to serve beyond labor in oppressive systems. And so I never would have seen myself as a business owner because I didn't understand business and entrepreneurship. I was a public servant for the first half of my life, and I am now living my most creative, purposeful, soul-led life in this by having surrendered and stepped into the unknown. And I'm connected and working with just amazing people and supporting their missions. So I mean, beyond the work, like we just spent the weekend away in the mountains in the area where my father grew up. Like my life here with my family is just as beautiful as it could be. Like I feel like I'm living in a dream.
I love this so much for you because so many people don't get to experience what true living really looks like. I was
Hmm.
listening to someone on a podcast, black gentleman, 19 Keys, and he was talking to some young men in California area somewhere, and he talked about how especially for I think for black men, they're kind of always on guard or feeling, like they've got to be manned up or whatever. And he was
Yeah.
sharing how when he went to Ghana, that it was the first time that he realized that he could relax and felt safe.
Mhm.
And it just
Yeah.
said most people come to America to make money, and
Yeah.
they other other places in the country, people are really living. And that just spoke to me so
Hmm.
loud. And you're sharing that makes me
Yeah.
think about that. Um, I love this. And so now that's four generations of your family, your children, you, your parents, and your great
My
grand.
grandparents. Yes, my parents are nice. So my dad isn't here right now. He's back
Okay.
and forth between here and the US because
Okay.
he receives medical care still in the US as someone who's been fighting and surviving cancer. But his generation is well represented because he's one of seven. So I'm still with all of his siblings
Okay.
here. I have five aunties and one uncle, and several of them live really close, like walking distance from where we are right now. So yes, four generations very close together.
You have an entire village. I love that. And it takes a village when you have children.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's what kept
absolutely.
me here as well. What,
Yeah.
wow, this is so rich. What is one surprising thing about you that most people don't know?
Okay, now I kind of cheat. For my entire life, I kind of cheat with this question. I'm sticking with it because I thought about it. I'm gonna stick with it. Most people don't know that I am a fraternal twin. That's been my lifelong answer. I am a twin. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So fraternal, not identical, but you mentioned
Not
you have
identical.
sisters. So do you also have a brother, or you're a fraternal twin with your sister?
Yes, and I should mention I've always said grown up saying two sisters, but my twin is in non-binary, so it has come out as non-binary very recently. So I'm still honoring that and adjusting my
Sure.
answer to that. So
Okay.
non-binary and transitioning. So, but I'm just blessed to have a twin. Yeah, fraternal. We look nothing alike, and our personalities are very different. But that's the homie. Like we we shared a womb together. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, okay. I love that. Let's see what else I got on the question board. Can you share a personal story about a book that has significantly impacted your life? Or it could be a podcast, it could be anything really that might help someone else. What significantly impacted your life?
Oh my gosh, this question had me thinking for ages because of course like I was like, do I go into like, Paulo Freire or bell hooks, like the books that radicalized me and all of that, or my
Mm,
indigenous teachers, so much there. And I said, no, I'm not gonna pick one of those because I feel like people can find that in my work. What I'm gonna talk about is a couple novels. Um, Ones that I've read more recently too in the last few years. And so
mhm,
one, it's called Black Cake, and it came out now as a Netflix series. But if you just watch the Netflix series, that's not good enough. You have to read the book. The book is about a Caribbean person, a Caribbean woman. It was the
mhm,
first book I ever read that spoke about a Haka character.
mm,
So I grew up with zero Haka representation in my world in the US, zero, especially not in a mainstream, like a best-selling book or TV, anything like that. And I was, what, 32, 33 years old before I was reading a novel that had mentioned nothing about Asian anything. And there, her dad was Haka. Like I see the words and like it's still a visceral experience. Like this is why representation matters and stories matter because to see that an author had chosen to put my ethnicity there and right into the storyline, that was very memorable for me. And then the second book, if I can sneak this in too, is also another
absolutely.
novel speaking to the power of stories and imagination. This book is called The Light Pirates. And you've gotten a little taste in some of my answers. I'm so passionate about stewarding the earth and addressing issues of climate change and making sure that we all return to a sense of balance and home. This
Hmm.
book imagines what will happen if the climate disasters don't stop. But what's amazing about this book, because there's so many like apocalyptic end of world type of movies and books out there. This
Right.
book will make you feel like it's what's happening right now and what's going to happen next month and next year and the year after that. Like it takes you through a storyline where you imagine yourself living through it right now.
Mm,
And it's important that we start to imagine that because when we just see the end of the world as like so drastic
right.
and so crazy, it remains a myth that we don't address. When a story can take us from our starting point to the middle point, that's when we're asking the right questions. That's when we're feeling the right emotions. Like I think about that book every time the wind blows.
Mm,
Every time it rains, I think about that book and I think about my choices because it comes down to those everyday choices, who we're relating with, what food we're eating, where we're spending our time, what we're consuming, like all of those choices. And not to put all of the responsibility in individual power because it's the corporations that are really killing this. But even then, what are we doing to counteract those dominant systems?
absolutely.
So this book was really powerful for me for that.
And who's the author? The Light Pirates.
Oh, the light. I wish I would not. I should have looked it up. The light pirate. Can you give me a sec so I can look it up really quick?
Mhm. And it's pirate, not pirates, just the Light Pirate.
No, it's the pirate. Yeah, the light pirate.
Awesome. And Black Cake,
Uh,
because I want to
Black cake.
check
Yeah.
these out. Hopefully they're on Audible. Do better with an Audible
Yeah,
book.
I think they are. They are. The light pirate is by Lily Brooks Dalton, and
Oh,
then Black Cake is by I want to say her name is Charmaine. Um, let's look. Oh, yeah,
awesome.
Charmaine Wilkerson. Charmaine Wilkerson.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Let me see if there's anything juicy left that I want to ask. Ah, I like asking this question. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would tell baby JoJo, that's what they call me growing up, JoJo. I would tell her that she is enough, that she is worthy of love and just worthy of being alive just as she is. That she doesn't have to be perfect in order to earn love, that she is caring and kind and generous and all of those things, and none of those things determine her worth of being alive, and being loved, that she can be loved even on her bad days and even on the moments when she is selfish and dysregulated and having a hard time and confused and needing help. I would tell her she could ask for help. Um, and I would tell her she did a great job of making the most of every situation she was put in and creating a life that has been so full and meaningful and creative and overcoming. And I'm so grateful for her.
Yeah, that sounds just right. Sounds just right.
Yeah.
It sounds like everything that I see before me in you.
Mm.
I love this. I love this. So where can folks find you?
They can find me. Dr. Joey Liu is the name of my website, my Instagram handle. I'm not on LinkedIn as much, but you can find me there as well. And then also on YouTube. I have a little bit on there right now, much more coming out in 2025. I'm really excited for what I'm sharing with the world in 2025. So yeah, add me, connect with me. I tell folks like when they follow my page, I'm here to start and sustain real conversations. And sometimes folks are a little surprised at that, but you can drop me a line and I'm a real person and I'm here to talk and hold space and get to know, you. If you're called to being in my community, I'm really here to build community and do something together.
Awesome. So what does that look like? What do you have going on right now?
So I still am receiving one-on-one clients. It's getting a little full at the moment, but I still do have some spaces available for one-on-one clients. But moving into 2025, I'm really excited to be offering some self-paced courses, and probably in the fall is when we're going to launch a group coaching program to open up a little bit more space for aligned folks. I have right now, you can go onto the website and access some free workshops that were held live, and we'll be doing more free live workshops in 2025 as well as some paid options for a deeper dive into the works, 3-day intensive coming up. So lots of options. And in 2025, I am speaking this into existence. I've been working on a book. It's going to come out in 2025. It's going to be a
Yes,
journaling book called Write Your Way Home. So yes, there's going to be a lot of different ways to interact. Um,
I love
yeah, I'm
this.
excited.
I love this. Is there anything else you would like to share that maybe I did not ask?
I want to share my deep gratitude, Selena. Like from the second that I jumped on this call with you, I have just felt the generosity of your presence and your ministry to really hold space and let folks shine. It's so beautiful. I feel so honored to be here today. I wanted to ask before we let you go, if there's a little bit more time. I love this mission that you have of disruption, and I wanted to ask you personally, what in this moment are you disrupting for yourself, and what are you hoping that your community is disrupting
I
collectively?
love this question because that was my next question if you had any questions for me.
Yeah.
Ask me the first part again. What was the question?
So, what are you disrupting personally in yourself in this moment? Because I know we're always like kind of flowing through different chapters. So internally, and then what type of disruption are you calling your community to be collectively disrupting in 2025 or in this
Okay.
moment right now?
Personally, I I've been disrupting. Um, I was in a marriage that took me away from myself, so I know what that looks like to be disconnected and not know who I was. And I like to share that now I feel like I'm getting back to my essence, like getting my mojo back.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and feeling that dynamic and what that really looks like, because I'm older and I'm wiser and all of the things. And so I am disrupting the labels of PTSD, trauma stressors, the I have dysfunctional pelvic symptoms. I have bowel and bladder symptoms. Just all of the things that require me to really focus on my self-love care is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And being able to do that because there's so many things in the world that can have you feeling like you should focus your attention other than on yourself. And so
Right.
that's a journey. And that's what I also want for the people that I'm called to serve. I focus in the areas of self-love, healing, power, identity, time, and financial freedom. And
Yeah.
they are all possible. And so that's my focus in my area. The people that in these conversations, I want to share, what they're disrupting in their area of expertise. And when I put the call out, I'm grateful that you answered that call because I think that's important. What has gotten us where we are today is maintaining the status quo, right?
Yeah.
And that has not served anyone, not anyone that I know of. So now
Right.
it's time to do something different. So the call
Yeah.
is to be disruptive. What does that look like? Because some people say, well, I was just keeping the peace, but whose peace were you keeping?
Whose
Because,
piece? That's
yeah,
right.
because it cost you yours. So
Mm-hmm.
it is really to allow whomever is out there that knows that there is more in you, that you felt stifled, that you feel unfulfilled, that you might not even know, but you've got to do something different. So my community, I just launched it on Black Friday. It is called the Get Your Shit Together Circle because sometimes that's what it feels like. You don't know what it is, but you got to get your shit together. It could be your life,
Right.
it could be your business, it could be whatever that looks like for you. Um, and we just really hone in and take a look at that. And it starts with self, the internal, the internal work. Don't be afraid to go within. Your journey begins within. I like to say that it's a saying that I borrowed from someone else and I changed it. But it's life is a journey. And if you fall
Mm-hmm.
in love with your journey, you will be
Mm-hmm.
in love forever. 'Cause there's so
Mm.
many things that have us believing that what we need is outside of ourselves. Someone's
That's
gonna
right.
come
Yeah.
along and make us happy and all of these things. And you have all the answers. Everything that you need, you already have. And
Yeah, that's
I
right.
want folks to know and believe that. And so there's a lot of work, as you know, that needs to happen internally first and accepting of yourself and who you truly are. So my work really entails a lot of helping you get back to your true essence
Yeah,
before
that's
the
right.
world landed on top of you. Absolutely. So thank you
Mm.
very much for that question. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's very much a work in progress because I didn't know coaching was on my path. Um, so leaning into that feels the one thing that I knew I could do as I was getting these certifications in business and life. And one, I had been coaching for free for over 30 years. I didn't even know that it was a profession. And it's just realizing there's so much to it. It's so rich,
Mm-hmm.
so many ways, but I love it so much that I would do it for free.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, holy cow, holy Toledo Batman." So um, hopefully I answered that. I think I got them all. Anything
Oh,
else?
yeah. No, it was beautiful. What a beautiful answer. And I can see why we gravitated towards each other. I can see all the alignment in both our stories and our lived experiences have a lot of crisscross, right? But then
Absolutely.
how that's shaped the work that we do and how we approach that work. I feel so much
Absolutely.
resonance. So thank you for sharing that. That's
You're
beautiful.
welcome. I see the fierceness in you. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm sure that we will do much more work together.
Ah,
I
yes, I welcome that invitation. I can feel that.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, anything else before we go?
No, I'm so grateful. Thank you all for listening and tuning in. I hope you found something helpful in this conversation. I hope you found something that brings you a little bit more back home inside yourself and helps you disrupt anything that's not serving you. So I want to thank the audience for listening. And I want to thank you, Selena, for this conversation. This has been so gracious of you, and I have enjoyed my time here.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying yes and you coming on. We're both spirit
Yeah.
driven, and you never
Yes.
know where the magic leads when you lead with your heart. So I love that. Thank you all for being here today. I want you to take good care of yourself. I want you to subscribe at the link below if you're checking out this conversation. We will also be sharing a lot of it next week. So hang around and look for the additional clips that come out around the conversation. We will also drop all of Dr. Joey's information and where you can find her, the books that she's just shared with us, in the description as well. So that is our time. Thank you so much. And you know what? One thing, these conversations go so well. One thing that I do forget to do, let me see if anybody was out there chatting with us and joined the conversation before we go, because sometimes I miss that. All right, we didn't get any conversations uh, or questions. Very good. If you're catching this on the replay, still drop your questions. We will still answer them in the comments. Thank you so much. That's our time. Until next time, I'll see you.